The BYU Cougars make it a perfect statement week with a win over the Arizona Wildcats. And let's just put it this way, fireworks both on the court and off the court afterwards.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. This is a special postcast edition as BYU upsets number 19 Arizona. Huge win for the Cougars, quite frankly, 96-95. And hey, Tony Padilla might be good for something. That is making awful calls at the right time. Now, I'm only slightly facetious with this. A couple of you got upset on social media that I said Tony Padilla, when the call on Richie Saunders, I said he loves to inject himself into the game. I can't stand Tony Padilla as an official. It's just, that's a personal preference of mine. But the bigger point I was trying to make was that he was perfectly consistent at being inconsistent. And you look at that play, letter of the law, it's absolutely a foul call. Richie Saunders, to his credit, steps up, makes two major free throws. BYU sees out the game and gets a major win. And for the first time since 1988, your host, yours truly, in 1988, I was all of 1 year old. That is the last time that BYU has notched back-to-back top 25 upsets in program history. History being made by the Cougars, really impressive stuff. Kevin Young continues to show that I think he absolutely has the chops to coach at this level and coach at this level for a really, really long time. And the other thing about this is a statement win for BYU because they are peaking at the perfect time. They are on the cusp of going to the Big 12 tournament. They're going, obviously, to the NCAA tournament. Those of you who pay attention to the KenPom ratings, with the win, BYU moved up to 26 in the KenPom ratings. They were at 31 going into Saturday, if I recall correctly. And Ken Pomeroy said it on my radio show himself. If you're a team that's inside his top 30, it is almost impossible for you to miss out on the NCAA tournament field. So for BYU to move inside that top 30 spot on the KenPom ratings, BYU is now playing for seeding. Think about that. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were wondering, is BYU going to be able to scrape through? Will they sit on the bubble all the way up till Selection Sunday? Now they're back into it. They are absolutely in the NCAA tournament field with this win. It is one of those games that you needed to have in your back pocket. It's a road win, a Q1 win, all those different metrics that go into the selection committee's decision-making. BYU checked multiple boxes with that victory. And then obviously you back that up with the other one they had earlier this week. The Cougars are sitting in a really, really good spot. And that should excite you as a Cougar fan. We'll get to some of the comments here in a minute. You guys are already rolling them in live. If you do have comments, weigh in. And I do need to say at the outset, apologies for this getting out a little bit later, but I have other radio responsibilities I had to get done with Real Salt Lake for my radio station. So got home, got situated, and now we're doing it. Let's see, it's 1:01 a.m. Mountain Time. Let's go. But nonetheless, huge win for BYU. As I mentioned, 96-95 winners. Richie Saunders continues to prove yet again that he is a bona fide NBA draft prospect. I was talking with somebody up at my radio station who had a question. He essentially asked me, Jake, do you think legitimately that Richie Saunders is an NBA draft prospect this year? And I said, absolutely he is. I have been told by people reliably that when there are calls and discussions being had with NBA personnel at BYU, obviously the first guy that comes up in those conversations by and large is Jaeger Demon. He's a bona fide lottery prospect. He's a guy who's going to go in the top 10 of this year's draft. The number 2 guy that gets asked about, it's not Cannon Catchings by and large, it's Richie Saunders. Now, Richie probably isn't a first-round pick. He's probably more of a second-round pick, but he's a guy that is absolutely an NBA type player. He's got a tight, quick release on his shot. He plays dogged defense. He just absolutely gets after it on the court. John Rothstein called him a junkyard dog, called him the ultimate sixth man. Well, that's what Richie's calling card in the NBA is going to be. He's going to be a spot-up shooter. He's going to have to learn how to be better with his catch and release game, but he's getting better at that. Catch and shoot is what I'm trying to say, not catch and release. But he is going to be an NBA draft prospect. He is absolutely that, and he showed that yet again tonight against one of the best defensive teams. We're talking a top 10 rated defensive team. Richie Saunders only goes 8 of 10 from the field, 3 of 4 from 3, 4 of 5 from the free throw stripe. Obviously, those 2 late ones very big. 23 points to lead BYU in scoring in this game. Big-time players show up in big-time games. Richie Saunders is a big-time basketball player, and that's not to take anything away from other players. Mawit Mag, big-time shots from him once again in this game. I thought that we saw Cannon Catchings kind of emerge from his shell. 15 minutes, scores 14 points, 4 of 6 from 3. That's what you need from Cannon. He is a guy that has been scrutinized so heavily this season, and for good reason. He was supposed to be a one-and-doner, and he very well might still be that. But to have a game like this against a top-notch opponent off the bench showed that Cannon is, I think, buying into his role, and it's good to see that. Kevin Young said post-game he's had him on a pretty short leash lately, and for good reason, because when he's not been playing at his best, it's been hampering BYU's ability to win basketball games. But for Cannon to emerge and play the way that he did, that's really, really nice to see. So there's a lot going right for BYU right now. And that's the fun part about this. This is the time you want to be peaking. I've said it that I want to see BYU advance in the NCAA tournament. Of course, I've got these Utah fans, my mentions on social media. Oh, the only question now is how many points is BYU going to lose by in the first round? You know what? Pound sand. Go worry about your own team over there. That's the thing about this. I look at all this, and also once again the foul call late. I get all of it. Brandon says this: Coach Lloyd was a class act in the press conference. Dead right. Tommy Lloyd is one of my favorite coaches across sports. He said, "Hey, it's a bad call. I've been told it's the Big 12. They say that guy's the best official in the game. Yeah, that they're talking about Tony Padilla, whatever." But Tommy Lloyd, to his credit, said, we shouldn't have put ourselves in that situation. We allowed them to score, what was it, 94 points up to that point on us. He said, we can't allow that. And he's right. BYU, for whatever reason, feels very comfortable at the McHale Center. One of the Arizona reporters said the last time the Arizona gave up that many points on their home court, some team named BYU in 2011 with Jimmer Fredette scoring 49 points was the guy that was doing that. So really impressive stuff. Obviously, post-game, the student section decided to use a refrain that BYU's become all too accustomed to hearing from opposing fan bases. Incredibly quick, Desiree Reed-Francois, the athletic director at Arizona, issued a public statement saying this. Let me pull it up here, and we'll get to that momentarily. But the bigger point to be made is that the fan behavior is one thing, and it used to be that it was directed directly at BYU. I'm just going to step on my soapbox for a minute here. I remember back in the day, I would hear it at Wyoming. We're talking some of the old Mountain West stops. You'd hear bleep BYU. Well, now it's bleep the Mormons. And that's where I kind of draw the line, because many of you know I espouse to be a pretty faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I fall short in my efforts to be more Christ-like than almost anybody out there, I feel like. But when you start to mock my religion, it gets a little tough for me to think it's a one-off, because we saw this with Providence earlier this season. We have seen it with the Oregon and USC football fan bases. We can go back to Stanford in the mid-20s. It's getting a little old. And the statements, statement here: following tonight's basketball game was brought to our attention that an unacceptable chant occurred. On behalf of the University of Arizona Athletic Department, we apologize to BYU, the student athletes, coaches, and fans. The chant is not reflective of who we are and should not have happened. Okay, great. So be it. But there's this little part of me that's like, I'd like some pushback from BYU. I'd like some pushback from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on this. Hey, it's not acceptable. Stop it. There are so many other classes, both religious, racial, all kinds of stuff, that they are things you don't cross. And for whatever reason, the LDS Church, it's a line you can cross as an opposing fan. The crazy thing about this is Arizona's got one of their senior associate ADs who is a member of the church. So that is what it is. But the bigger point to be made is it's a massive win for BYU. And it is going to be a game that BYU is going to be looking back very fondly on, to have that in their back pocket come Selection Sunday. B. Smith, we all fall short. We do. But blind man, should not keep happening. I wish I could do more than to call it out for what it is, but it's sad that it continues to happen. That's the thing about it. So I'd like to see a little pushback maybe from somebody who has more of control over it. But the bigger point to be made is it's a perfect opportunity for BYU now to play for seeding. With this win, there was some thought the BYU sitting on kind of that 9, 10, 11 seed line coming into this game. If you look at some of the projections with this win, and we'll see more of this when the bracketology comes out in the morning and obviously as the week progresses, we're talking about BYU pushing now 6, 7 seed, like kind of same territory they were last year. That's how big of a win this is. So it's really cool to see this. BW saying, figuring out how to play Big 12 tough. Defense looks strong. Absolutely. It was really, really fun to see BYU show what they're capable of. So I guess my overall thought from tonight's game was that, yes, it was a foul, and Tony Padilla, he may drive me nuts, may drive many other fan bases nuts as an official, but it benefited BYU. And the other thing about it is that now BYU can look at it and say, okay, we have Arizona State on Tuesday, if I recall correctly. It might be Wednesday. But then you have West Virginia at home next Saturday. You face off against Iowa State midweek the following week, and then you finish up against Utah. You go 3-1 in those games, and I'm currently projecting if Iowa State's healthy, you probably lose that game on the road. But you go 3-1 down the stretch, BYU is going to be sitting pretty come Selection Sunday. It's going to be a really, really fun NCAA tournament lead up to that. Now, obviously, we want to see BYU kind of get past the trend of where they've been crashing out of that tournament in the first round of late. But okay, it is Wednesday. Thank you, B. Smith. It is Wednesday for ASU. So yeah, Wednesday night for BYU and Arizona State. But I really do think that right now, BYU, the ceiling, to answer your question, Econ with Adam, ceiling at the very best, if you were to go 4-0 down the stretch here, you might push for a 5 because that would include a really, really impressive win on the road against Iowa State. But even if you don't get that, you're 3-1 down the stretch. 6 is probably the top. And based on how the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee decides to seed things, it could affect BYU and drop them a seed line or 2. I think the bottom right now, in my mind, is 9. We'll see. So it's one of those things. Oh, I didn't know this. Devin says one of the players on Arizona's roster is LDS. So I don't know. The thing is that it's a very abhorrent chant. It's bigotry. Let's call it for what it is. But alas, it only happens when BYU wins games by and large. It's kind of funny, but I know it happened against Providence when they lost, but it's bigotry. And maybe at some point we'll have a bigger discussion. I'm talking the bigger we as a society, but alas, all the same, BYU gets a major victory, a Q1 win, and it is going to be one that BYU is going to really, really enjoy. And hey, maybe BYU should play more games at the McKell Center, because once again, when you score the most points on Arizona's home court of any team in the past 10 plus years, and the 2 times it's been happening is BYU, and one of them was Jimmer Fredette going for 49. Pretty impressive stuff for the Cougars. But that's going to do it for this postcast. As always, thank you for all your guys' support. You guys are the reason why I do what I do. Staying up way late to do this postcast, but I wanted to get it in, celebrate the win, take a little bit of a victory lap. But all the same, the Cougars get the W, and now they look to Arizona State on Wednesday and a chance to add another win to the tally and keep building that resume. And once again, they're playing for seeding now. They're in the field. Now where they end up in that field, that's the big question that remains for the Cougars. But as always, thank you for y'all's support. Appreciate all of you for being with us every single day, being those everydayers we'd like to call you guys. And once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.